people here who've been shared some of that. And I was wondering, Anne, do you start us off? Or I mean, it's up to you. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Hello everybody, can you hear me? Yeah. Everyone okay? I'm Anne Kobayashi and I'm a member of Trident Ploughshares. I first met Myra in the late 90s in the Helensborough District Court, where we were both on trial. It was a simple entanglement with a bicycle, which I happened to be locked onto, which was my fault. But no. We were demonstrating at Cass Lane, and we were part, separately, at that time, of CND, of our regional CND groups. I was with East Anglia, and I went out on the coach. Myra was there, and she was there with Sue Davis, who many of you will probably know, and also Angela Broom. And some Scottish supporters. And Myra said to me afterwards, she hadn't much time for people who went on and on, so I'll try and say. She said to me, we were astonished, she said, that the Procurator Fiscal let you go on for so long. And I said, well, he asked me to explain why I did it. And I had to explain about nuclear weapons and their obscenity and all the other things that we should be spending money on. And Myra said, but you did go on for a long time. And despite that, she asked me to be part of a Trident Ploughshares group, which was just starting in this area, even though I came from the wilds of Essex. So I said, that's fine. And that's the way I got into Trident Ploughshares, which, as many of you will know, is a direct action, non-violent direct action group of concerned people who have got rather tired of petitions and marching and singing and decided we're going to impair the ability of the state to actually possess these weapons of mass destruction, as they had repeatedly not responded to letters to them. Angie Zelter was one of the people who kicked this off. And some of you may know Angie. Anyone who doesn't, it's worth having a look at the book, which I show you, which is called Activism for Life. And it's the history of the Trident Ploughshares movement and also many other interesting exploits Angie has done across the world, including especially in South Korea. And it's always about the disparity between the people who have the power and the people, and what ordinary people want, which is decent health, decent schooling, decent housing, and what do we spend the money on? We spend it on weapons of mass destruction. So that was the simple thing. And going along, we used to have meetings as the Trident Ploughshares group in Myra's flat in Zion House. And Myra provided us, because we got there about 6:30 usually, she provided us with supper. And she was working her way through a marvelous American cookbook. And she was going through the recipes very methodically, because this is Myra. And we had this wonderful meal. And Myra never, what we say at home, pulled a poor mouth. She didn't say, I love cooking for you lot, or why do you always wash up for me and then put everything in the wrong place? Because she really didn't like that. She'd say, leave it. And we'd say, no, Myra, we help you. Anyway, so the other thing that was very striking about Myra was her ability to respond to other interests which individual members of the Trident Ploughshares Muriel Lester's Affinity Group, which is what we were called, and Myra and Sue, I think, decided on that, and Angela. What they tolerated from our other interests, without us really appreciating how much energy and foresight and management skills Myra put into the rest of her life, which was outside direct action. And we only got glimpses of this. She didn't tell us long stories about she was doing a protest outside a hospital or at a health clinic or working directly with people who needed it. She was extremely restrained in contrast with the rest of us sometimes. And one of the reasons I've got the Roma flag up here is that one of the things I was personally very concerned about, and so is Zelda, who's also a member of the Muriel Lester's Affinity Group, that was, is the fact that I lived, and Zelda lived, near Dale Farm, which was a traveller community, a very large one. And they were planning, they were on their own land, but that didn't make any difference. They were on an ex-scrap yard. That didn't make any difference. There was a determination to move them out because their retrospective planning application didn't work. Anyway, Myra heard about this. She couldn't help it because we were always talking about it, because it was a very fast-moving situation, legally and direct action. And I always remember the sight of Myra on one of the yards in this very large, it was over, at one time, 200 families. One of the yards was vacant. People had gone away for a while. And the community decided to give it to the activists to use. And so these Traveller Solidarity Network of young activists mainly had moved in. And people who were visiting moved, including Myra, Angela, every one of the Muriel Lesters arrived down on Dale Farm at different times and participated in a non-violent way with trying to stop a really brutal clearance. Because the community owned their land, it was a clearance, not an eviction. Anyway, Myra, I remember going up to the yard one day, this yard that they were using, and seeing Myra just standing with, I think, Angela, washing up. And there were piles of washing up always, because people were coming and going. We had many, many visitors from many concerned groups across the country and from overseas. We even had the UN Special Rapporteur visit us, but none of it stopped Badminton Council. But Myra was washing up. She didn't complain, she didn't talk about it afterwards. She must have stood for hours doing work quietly and just talking. And when the actual clearance came, which sadly I had to go to Japan as an emergency at the time, Zelda was there. One of the women I knew very well came up and said, "Anne, we're very worried about your friend." And I said, "Why?" "She's all right." And they said, "She's lying down, in a tube, with her arm in a tube, in the cold, outside. She's had cold, And why wouldn't she go in?" And I said, "She's trying to stop the police getting into your home." "Oh, okay," they said, "but she's an old woman." And I said, "Don't say that to Myra, just give her some hot blankets." "Oh, they will." And they were very fond of Myra. They recognized a real stalwart fighter for peace and justice and decent treatment for all people, especially the marginalized. And so that's the memory I have. And a younger, much younger, most people are much younger than me now, said, this is Chris Blumer, a young man who joined us, I think, in his 20s, a musician. He said, "It's devastating to learn of the passing of peace activist Myra Garrett at the age of 92. She was an absolute legend and a massive inspiration." And I was astonished to learn how old she was when I was invited to her 80th back in 2012, at which still lying down on the road in front of Aldermaston at 6 a.m. on December mornings. And this is it, you know, Myra didn't say, I can't do this anymore. She put her hearing was also a bit impaired. She simply took on a different role within the group. Instead of lying down on the road, locked on, she became a support, which was also vital. Instead of doing that, she might be a liaison with police. There were lots of roles, and she did it without making a song and dance about it. She simply recognized she was losing some strength, and she did other things. She sat on a chair with signs up saying no entry, and things like that. So we really appreciated Myra. I really felt very sad when, after she'd moved to Cooper's Court with the gradual rotten condition she was suffering, because she hated losing agency, and we missed that strong voice of hers.